Hi, this is Ken Archer. I'm the Vice President of Product at Upwave, the brand intelligence platform. In today's expert update from Upwave, we're going to be talking about a new feature in the Upwave dashboard called the Outperformance Indicator. This is a new metric that was custom built for optimization decisions. So this webinar is for you if you rely on traditional brand lift statistics, observed lift, and statistical significance to measure and analyze campaign performance. But then when it comes to optimizing, you have to wait for statistical significance before taking action. And this is limiting your ability to optimize early in a campaign to brand outcomes. So brands often struggle to use the metrics typically reported for brand lift to make optimization decisions because of this weighting factor I referred to. A lot of our customers at Upwave have communicated this to us. Upwave is used primarily by advertisers who are looking to optimize, not just get post-campaign reports, but actually use reporting to optimize their campaign early and often throughout the campaign. And so because our customer base disproportionately is looking to optimize, they're talking to us a lot about how they use the metrics that we're putting out there to optimize, and we get a lot of complaints. We get complaints like, why do these metrics move in and out of stat sig all the time? And what's the right threshold at which I can start optimizing? When can I stop waiting? And which metrics should I use? They have observed with, you have p-values, you have statistical significance. And this weighting that they have to do is actually by design. It's by design because the traditional metrics that are used to measure and report out on brand lift performance, statistical significance based on p-values, they're actually intended to be reported out at the end of the campaign. They're intended to be used for post-campaign analysis, not to be used continuously mid-campaign, because these metrics, statistical significance, p-values, they answer an important question, but that question is different from the optimization question. When you're optimizing a campaign, you're asking the question, which tactics are helping my campaign? And it's important to know that that's not the question that statistical significance based on p-values answers. So let's take an example. So you've got a campaign that's running and you're using several first-party audiences, several third-party audiences, and you want to know which of these audience tactics are helping. So this is a traditional report that shows observed lift at the top of each audience tactic and indicators of statistical significance around those numbers. And so what you've got is the one in the middle, a third-party trade desk cleaning audience, and that has a high observed lift of 6%, observed lift in presumably awareness or favorability. But it is only statistically significant at a low threshold of 80%. Then to the left of that, you have a first-party audience of heavy users that is driving lower observed lift of 1.5%, but at a higher threshold of statistical significance, in this case, 90%. And then to the far right, you have this third-party millennial audience that is driving observed lift that's in the middle of those two, 3.5%, but at the highest observed lift of over 95%. And so what do you do with that information if you're looking to optimize the campaign? Well, the traditional answer from the statistics research community has been, well, to wait. That's what you need to do. Don't optimize yet. Wait until you get enough data, which is generally happens at the end of the study, at the end of the campaign, at which point statistical significance determinations can be made and the situation will be clear. Well, do you really have to wait though? Because you have a lot of information. It's just split up into these different metrics: observed lift, statistical significance, p-values. wouldn't it be great if you had one metric that combined all of this information to answer the question that you're asking when you want to optimize? We have been getting this request from a long time from our customers, and we're excited to be launching this new metric right now. So this new metric we call the Outperformance Indicator. And what it does is it tells you very directly what is the probability that a tactic is helping the campaign. Or in other words, what's the probability that a tactic is lifting the campaign average up? So in this example, let's go back. If you recall, Millennial had observed lift that was kind of in the middle of 3.5%, but the highest level of statistical significance. Well, that actually has the highest level of confidence, 80%, that tactic is helping the campaign, pulling up the campaign average. But then interestingly, if you look at the tactic that had the highest observed lift, it was still stat sig. So it had the highest observed lift and it was statistically significant. You would think that would be perhaps the tactic to shift budget or traffic towards. Well, actually, no. There's only a 56% probability that that's helping the campaign. So what you're getting here is like, how is this calculated? Where are we getting these numbers from? What you're getting here is we're combining all the information from all of those other metrics into this one metric. You're getting a combination of how much data we have for each tactic, what is the observed lift of each tactic, and what's the confidence that we have that each tactic will or will not drive higher lift for the campaign as a whole. So we're combining observed lift and uncertainty or confidence, which is based on how much data we have, into one single metric. So in the case of this third-party trade desk cleaning, it had very high observed lift, but the level of confidence was lower. And well, it's hard to really know how to combine those when those are split out into two different metrics so that you can make a decision. But that is what Upwave has done with this new Outperformance Indicator. So this Outperformance Indicator is now in the dashboard at Upwave. You can see here that it's a new tab. So you have brand lift, which shows your traditional brand lift statistics in chart or tabular format. But then you have a separate optimization tab, which shows this new Outperformance Indicator. We also have, because this is a new metric, we have a lot of inline content here to help you read and educate yourself about how this is calculated, how to interpret it, and when to use brand lift statistical significance versus when to use this Outperformance Indicator. So look for this in your Upwave dashboard, and feel free to reach out to your Upwave Customer Success Manager for more information. So with that, we will take some questions. If you do have questions, feel free to enter them into the Q&A. Allie, would you kindly do the Q&A? I don't seem to be able to pull them up, so maybe you can.
Absolutely.
Ask the questions.
Yep, we've got 4 in here already.
Okay, great.
Yep. So the first one is, when in a campaign can you start using this metric for optimization? What sample size threshold do you wait for?
That is a great question. So let me go back to the example. So there is no sample size threshold here. That's one of the great things about it. You don't have to wait until you reach some sort of rule of thumb threshold or magic threshold. Because in truth, like, all of these thresholds are fairly arbitrary. But what's great about this is you can continuously evaluate the Outperformance Indicator throughout a campaign. You don't have to wait. And so instead, the important question is not at what threshold in terms of sample size should I wait for. The important question is this a high stakes decision or a low stakes decision, given the level of confidence that I have here? So for example, let's take this third-party blue sky cleaning audience. So there's only a 23.7% chance this is helping. So if this was a high stakes decision, meaning let's say this was a media partner that you're thinking of completely pulling off the media plan, well, then you'd probably want to wait for a much higher level of confidence. You'd want this outperformance indicator to be, say, like probably under 10% before you made a high stakes decision like that. Particularly, let's say if you had done a custom creative format with this media partner, or you had a broader business relationship with this media partner. But if it's a lower stakes decision, like for example, shifting bid factors in a DSP, shifting budget between DSP line items in this example, well, then you could do that with this 23.7% confidence level that this is helping the campaign. You'd probably want to shift just a little bit of budget away from this audience, or reduce the bid factor in your DSP slightly for this audience, and then come back and look at the Upwave dashboard in a week, in a couple of days, once you have more data, and then see, is this continue to tell the same story and this number is getting lower, and you can then change that bid factor, reduce it even more, or as you get more data, is the confidence level going up? And so then maybe you want to bring that bid factor back to what it was. Another low stakes decision would be changing creative weights in a rotation in an ad server. So that's really the important question here, because you no longer have to wait for a certain threshold to be met. Instead, you're asking the question, given whether this is a high stakes or a low stakes decision, what level of confidence do I want before making the decision? And then can I make that decision in a graduated way, like a gradual increase in or decrease in budget or creative rotation weight?
Next question, is this unique to Upwave? Is this something I would see in other products?
That's a good question. Our customers tell us that this is not available in any other products that report brand lift for advertising campaigns. This is something, this general category of metric is available in A/B testing platforms that are commonly used on websites like Optimizely or Visual Website Optimizer, because there you face the same problem. You're setting up an A/B test, say between, with a new banner. And you don't want to wait until the statistical significance. You don't want to wait until the A/B test is done before starting to shift traffic. You'd rather have it be instead of having it be a 50-50 split between your A and B treatments until the very end, you'd kind of like to send more traffic to the winning treatment before the A/B test is done. Well, in response to that feedback, these platforms came out with what they call multi-arm bandits, which it's not exactly the same math, because our math needs to be customized here to the advertising context. It's broadly solving the same problem. So we're solving the same problem here in brand lift reporting for advertising campaigns, as multi-arm bandits solve in website A/B testing. It's just we have to calculate it differently using slightly different math to take into account what's specific to advertising.
Does this optimization indicator correlate with lift?
Great question. So yeah, if you were to look at, so when you, in our platform, when you hover over each optimization, each outperformance indicator, you see the observed lift, you see the exposure, control, proportions for that attitude and sample size, but it does not correlate. It does not correlate exactly to observed lift, and that's because you not only have observed lift, you also have how much data do I have here, how confident how much confidence do I have? And so in this case, if you remember, the third-party trade desk cleaning tactic had the highest observed lift, but the second highest outperformance indicator. I find myself a way to sort of intuit this to really grok it better is to envision each of these as like a distribution, just like a curve, like you think of a bell curve. And so, the millennial distribution, it's going to be high and tight and narrow. Whereas this one is going to be flatter and broader. And when I think of it that way, then that helps me to sort of visually picture the combination of these two things: the observed lift, because that determines where the center of that bell curve is, and then the confidence level, which is it high and tight, or is it shorter and broader? And that's essentially what this outperformance indicator is doing, is it's comparing all these curves to the overall curve for the campaign to then report out the probability that a particular tactic is outperforming the campaign average.
Right. Next one is, what if you look at statistical significance and it seems clear that one tactic is stat sig and another is not? Wouldn't that be enough to optimize towards the stat sig tactic?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's say that let's say you had two tactics and one was stat sig, the other's not stat sig. Isn't it obvious at that point what you should do? And actually, the answer is no, because statistical significance determinations don't compare tactics to each other. They compare tactics to the absence of the tactic. So they compare people who are exposed to a tactic to people who are not exposed to a tactic. But it's important to remember that statistical significance is really an arbitrary threshold on this p-value, which is from 0 to 1. And so you could have one tactic that is just on one side of the threshold and another tactic that's barely on the other side of the threshold. And you can't really say with a lot of confidence that one is therefore better than the other just because they happen to be on just barely on opposite sides of this line in the sand. So it's important to remember that just because one tactic is stat sig and the other is not, that does not mean that it is statistically significant that one is outperforming the other. You can't draw that conclusion. So even in that case, we would still say you should use this outperformance indicator to combine all of this information into one metric that tells you what's the relative level of confidence that you can have that different tactics are helping the campaign.
Next question is, will the Upwave platform push alerts when the outperformance indicator hits certain thresholds?
That is a great question, and something that our product team is thinking hard on. And they're currently working on this. On alerts in general, alerts in the dashboard. They're thinking about adding email alerts. And so, yeah, I would anticipate that you're going to see that in the near to medium term future. And I will pass that request on to our product team.
Next question, can a KPI have a negative observed lift but be above the campaign average in the optimization tool? If so, how would we make sense of and use this data?
Great question. No. If a tactic has an observed lift that is higher than the campaign observed lift, then it will always have an outperformance indicator that's above 50%. So all of the tactics where the outperformance indicator is above 50%, the observed lift is higher than the overall campaign observed lift. the question is, how much confidence can you have that that's what's happening out there in the reality, in the real world? Because here we're just projecting based on a sample, and so there's always uncertainty. So that's what these outperformance indicators do, is they combine these two. Conversely, all the tactics where the bar is going down from 50% because it's a less than 50% probability that it's helping the campaign, the observed lift is less than the campaign observed lift. Again, the determination of how far the bar goes down, how low that confidence level is driven by then how much data we have on that. Looks like we have a question in the chat. Why is a high bar, these are great questions. Why is a high bar an indicator that a tactic will outperform? Why isn't an indicator that it will, why isn't it an indicator that it will regress toward the mean? That is a good question. So if you were to, we have this millennial tactic that's 80%. What we're saying here that you can interpret about this, the way you can interpret that is to say, if you had 100 tactics that all had an 80% outperformance indicator, that 80 of those 100 are helping the campaign, are pulling the campaign average up. So that means that 20% of those are going to regress towards some mean. But so 20% of them, you know, if we had population level data, as we get more data, it's going to come regress down towards 50% and then either stay there or ultimately go down below 50%. But 20% of them will. And so that really, that's the way I like to think about it when I'm making optimization decisions based on this indicator. That really drives it home, the need to focus on, well, the nature of the decision to know how to interpret this number. Because when I think, oh, so that means when I make, you know, 100 of these decisions in this case, in 20 of those 100 decisions, it will turn out that I was wrong at the end of the campaign. Well, then that helps me focus on, okay, well, how comfortable am I with that risk, with that level of risk in this decision? Well, if it's shifting creative weights in a creative rotation or shifting bid factors in a DSP, I'm pretty comfortable with that, particularly since I know I can go back and look at this when we have more data in a week and possibly reverse that decision. However, if the decision I'm making is whether to give a big presentation to 20 people arguing for pulling a partner from a plan or you know, doubling the budget we're sending to a partner, well, then I think I may want to wait a little bit. Yeah, so that's that is how to interpret these numbers. Is ultimately you have to just align these the percentage confidence levels here with the nature of the decision. Is it a high stakes decision, a low stakes decision? How much risk are you comfortable making with this decision? But what's great is that this new indicator gives you the number that you can use to be able to think that way. Whereas previously, you didn't even have the number. This information was sort of dispersed throughout multiple numbers in front of you, p-value, stat sig, observed lift, that you couldn't even make that calculation of, you know, given this confidence level, you know, am I comfortable making this particular decision based on this level of confidence? You have any other questions, Allie? These are great questions.
I think that's a wrap on the questions, unless 1 or 2 more minutes in case anyone wants to get one last one in.
Yeah, so I'll just close by saying that so the outperformance indicator is in the dashboard now, and we are really excited to see the impact that this has on empowering advertisers to take a performance lens to their brand advertising in this, and treating brand advertising the same way that they have treated direct response advertising historically. So with brand advertising, for a lack of this type of a metric, it's a number of brand campaigns have been optimized towards proxies like click-through rates, ad engagement, view through, site visit rate, that don't really reflect the actual brand outcomes that are intended to be driven by the campaign. And so what we're really excited about with this outperformance indicator is that it will empower advertisers to start actually optimizing brand campaigns towards the brand outcomes against which they will be evaluated. So thanks for joining for this expert update from Upwave. We will have another one of these in 2 weeks. We do these twice a month. And look forward to talking with you soon.